particular engraving here is referred to as Bulgandry. It's very famous in this region. In fact, it's probably the most famous engraving in the whole of this region. It's the first engraving found at Umina that sets out an historical timeline. The whole of this platform is referred to as a Bulgandry rock platform, and nobody really understands what it's about. It is not what they think it is. It's something far more important and much more esoteric. Okay. So we've got the moon over here, and by the way, that's not a boomerang. I've actually seen a copy of this done by W.D. Campbell, and he did it in about 1896, when this was much more defined. And it's definitely always circular. It's a complete circle. It's a crescent moon on this side. They've made a mistake to call it a boomerang, and it's not. The rays coming out of the top of his head, I think, indicate wisdom, some sort of great wisdom. Across there, he balances the sun and the moon. Now that's really important, and I want to read a couple of quotes from the book of Hermes. Now Hermes is a reincarnated form of Thoth. Now Thoth we found engraved as part Durham and part Thoth all over the place, and we'll talk about that later, but it's a common theme. We found icons for Thoth all around here, and I want to read what the book of Hermes says about the way Thoth introduces his wisdom and knowledge, and it reads like this. Indeed, the appearance of the sun and the moon are omniform, rather like our mirrors that produce the likeness through refraction and brilliance. The importance of this is the mirror reflection and the duality of the seasons. I have already told you of the mirror reflection of the moon. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is when we go to the glyphs, we see this mirror reflection in what I think is the more esoteric part of the story. We've seen the UFOs upside down, we've seen death, we've seen stars upside down, and here, if this is Thoth, and we found Thoth all over the place, and he's directing us towards the glyphs, which he is, then his secret should be written as a mirror reflection. And I feel that this is a very important part of the Gosford glyphs, simply because this gives us the key and the author of what we see as the older part of this story. The boat, which you can see running all the way across there, Arnie Minnie told me this is to represent he comes from afar, from a distant place. He was not part of this group. Yes, this is an Aboriginal carving that was done by Aboriginal men, and maybe women too, I'm not sure about that because I don't know the site that well, but certainly, without a doubt, it's the same story of Thoth in a different way. And you'll also notice there, if you look very carefully, the same apparent markers take place. There's a circle here, another sun disk, a large one, a smaller one over here. Maybe that's marking the time he came. And if you look at that disc over there, there's something coming out of it again. Again, this is another part of this mysticism we haven't quite read. What I can tell you for sure is what it isn't. If that's a shield, that is the worst shield an Aboriginal person has made in their life. It will not deflect anything, and he will die the first time it's used. If that's a boomerang, it's the worst boomerang ever made because it's made perfectly round, and that's not how they turn out. And if that's a woomera, the spears he's carrying have got to be 15 foot high. It's a ridiculous concept. It is a sword. It's a broadsword. This is part of this Egyptian story. Whether it's more ancient, I don't know, but we can certainly tick off the word Egyptian. If we want to throw the word alien in later on, that's a maybe. But there's no doubt, Arnie Minnie is absolutely sure this is an Egyptian icon that's been engraved here because he's revered. And this is something that's very important in this story. The Egyptians came here for that, the esoteric wisdom. I've been told by elder after elder, they came here to learn the mystical, to learn the things that they didn't understand. They were technologically superior to the Aboriginal people. When it comes to spiritual matters, they were apprentices, and these were their masters. This guy is special. I believe this is Thoth. And look at these two lines across here. Is that a helmet? I don't know, but we don't have a neck. That's intentional. We have no neck here. So it's a spiritual story with a broadsword, and as we know, the Aboriginal people never had broadswords, they never had metal, and a huge boat that runs all the way down as far as you can see. It's part of that same story again. There's a very good chance here, the more we look at these legs, the more obvious it becomes to me. If you look at the leg on the far side there, it's got that club foot that I expect. On the other side, you've got the longer leg. Now, Durham, who is called the son of Byami, and we need to understand Byami is called not a god, but a sky hero. So he's the son of the sky hero, must be shown with one club foot and one long leg. Now, every engraving we found around here, where we've got an ibis head or a monkey head, which is the two incarnations of Thoth, always we have the two legs like this. This has got the same two legs. This to me is even another indication, like the other 4 engravings I've found around here where I've seen markings of Thoth, this has got to be Thoth again. Now I know other people have said it could be Thoth, they were right. I also have got no doubt those two markings there, those sun discs there. I know where there's another engraving like this elsewhere, and there's the same sort of markings again with the same two sun discs right alongside on the left hand side. Too many coincidences here. Okay, this particular object, while we're talking about Arnie Minnie, I really should mention these two objects. This object here was actually worn as jewellery by son of Arnie Millie's relations. If you look at the top there, you'll see part of a round clasp. Originally, they put a chain through there and it was worn around the neck. And they wore this for quite some time until quite recently the clasp came away. Now what's interesting about this particular piece of jewellery is flat on one side, and on the other side, I think I can see a figure with a foot here, and then a knee coming up like that. I've had a look at the glyphs there, and there's two, one for music and one for scribe that come awful close. What's particularly interesting about this particular glyph, this particular pendant, is number one, the foot's back to front again. It's reversed. The foot should be on this side, not that side, so we've got that reversing again. And secondly, when you hold this, it is incredibly light. And we know, Arnie Minnie's told me, they've had a look at this, there's no iron ore, there's no lead, which means it's not post-cook. It's got to be something older. This was found between the two walls of the Gosford glyphs, and it was found encrusted in debris. Arnie Minnie said it took her half an hour to clean this up and to find the glint underneath there. She didn't even know what it was. She saw a little bit of a glint and cleaned this up. This was found between the two walls, and it's possible this may well have been Nefertari's necklace, which is, by the way, mentioned in the story there, or it could even be older. What was also found was this particular object here. She thought it could be the bone of Nefertari. Now what I've done since then is I went to a hospital, I can't mention at the moment because they asked me to keep quiet about this. I went to the fractures unit, and the gentleman who looked at this said, this is very light, very ancient, and could be a femur bone. He then said, but you won't know until you get a CAT scan. I had a CAT scan done from the hospital, who I can't mention at the moment because I actually did this for free and I couldn't pay for it. And their comment was, it has the same density as bone. So from one expert I've got, it could be a femur bone, which is the hip bone, the top piece there, that's the piece that locks in. And from another expert I've got, it has got the same density as a bone. Since this was found between the two walls of the glyph, along with this. Auntie Minnie found both of them, has kept them under custodianship for about 15, 20 years until she gave it to me. I would suggest to you there's a fairly good chance this is another part of that ancient Egyptian story. I can tell you one thing, Aboriginal people do not forge metal. And because this was found deep in the dirt between the two glyphs, it would seem by association and proximity, it must be part of that same story. Now knowing the glyphs are legitimate, surely that legitimises this. We suspect when we feel it, it's very, very light. It feels like aluminium, but that's tricky because we need 600 to 700 degrees to make that. So there's a technology there we're still chasing up. Another part of that same story. Okay. Also found, apart from Auntie Minnie, what she found, there was another person, two people actually, Dan Collins and Hans Dieter von Senth. When they found the other set of hieroglyphs, about 25 of them in 2 stone tablets, beneath it they found this. This is actually a basalt chisel with little specks of what's called an olivite inside there. And what's fascinating about that is Hans has had this looked at by a gemologist, and he still should have a geologist to look at it, but even so, what the gemologist said is the basalt most likely, and I'll use the words he used, originated in Egypt. And olivite is common, prevalent throughout Egypt. So this is another part of the things that have been picked up around these particular hieroglyphs that validate what that's also about. I believe that. We seem to have 5 areas that have turned up. 3, I believe, are factual and can't be contested. 2, I think are very, very close. The first thing we found for sure is this place and this whole region. It's got astronomy. It's got all forms of astronomy. The oldest astronomy in the world is found at a place called Leroy-Dyer, which is in Victoria. Around here, above the glyphs, directly above it, in a 300 metre grid, we found over 50 astronomical markers. Graham, and they were done as a circle. When we went up and saw Graham, further up in the Katoomba region, we found emu prints, which were also astronomical markers. I've seen constructions of 15,000 and 50,000 rocks that mark out certain alignments and solstices. All around Australia, these people were astronomers from way, way back. We need that skill, because when the Ramengeri told me they circumnavigated the world in a figure 8 in ancient times, you have to have astronomy to circumnavigate. That is a given. The second thing I now believe is a given is that the Egyptians were here. Elder after elder has told me the same story. To be honest, up until I saw David and Auntie Bev, we had 60 pieces of evidence that illustrated the Egyptians were here. I had that marked down as 51. After talking to David, and David is an honourable man. He's not a liar. I've spoken to him. You can see it in his eyes. This man is doing this for no other reason than getting the truth out. Auntie Bev tells us that the ancient Egyptians were here, and then I find out something I didn't know. I knew they came here for a pilgrimage. I knew they came here to learn about the esoteric ways and the mysticism the Aboriginal people knew about. Now I find out that Auntie Bev tells us that the more older glyphs are theirs. They had a written language, so that starts to evolve even more. And another thing we found, we can put that down as a definite. The third thing I found now is when I spoke to John Burns, one of the top geologists in this country, we spoke about Eugene Stockton's discovery of an axe, a stone pebble chopper, which is at least 60,000 years and maybe 110,000 years. I've seen another one of those Angel John Gallard picked up from the Snowy Mountains, which he dates between 60 to 100,000 years. And here's the problem with that. The Out of Africa theory has Africans turning up in Australia at the very top end 60,000 years ago, and here we have tool sites both in Penrith and the Snowy Mountains of things that were made by human beings that are 60, 80, 100,000 years old. The Out of Africa theory is wrong. As the Aboriginal people have told us time after time, they are the first people. For me, those 3 things are given. The next 2 are in the probability category. The first is the melting of rocks. I've seen this everywhere, and person after person has said it to me. I haven't prompted them. They've said, I see melted rocks. At Butterbox, the drain that we've seen, the drain is actually, it's been formed and it's been melted, and the lips are 68 centimetres, and through the whole of that region we see melted rock. John Burns said that the drain that we actually seen, and I'll use the words he gave me and allowed me to use, is not like anything else he's ever seen. He's not prepared to say it's man-made, but he's gone very close towards that. The mummification table we saw, I believe that's been melted. Graham's first site, I believe that rock's been melted. And I think we're going to find all the way around. And remember when we did an interview with Mark and he spoke about those 4 table legs, and I said to him later, I'd show him the picture of the drain at Butterbox. Later on I did. And he said that the coloration and the form of that rock was exactly the same again. Now here comes the tricky part of the equation. Who melted the rock? Now, we've written 4 books, we haven't mentioned this word. We've had 20 articles published, and we've never mentioned this word. But now we're going to start talking about UFOs and Pleiades. I don't have a choice here. David Fitzgerald spoke about the cave of extraterrestrials. The elders have said time after time, they pointed to the sky and said, we came from Pleiades. They've said that to me so many times. The Ramengeri told me, one day you will have to talk about this. Uncle Reuben Kelly, the last Dunghutti elder that was cutting boys, said way back, he said, we came in a spaceship, and when the spaceship came to the earth, it shattered and exploded and turned into crystal. Auntie Bev speaks about the explosion. Graham speaks about this explosion and says that the dreaming stories all over the state talk about this. So we're starting to get a different story coming up here. When we looked at Martin's compass, you need to understand that compass is off by about 15 to 20 degrees. We need to think, how far do we go back before that's aligned? And I'm suspecting we're going back more than thousands. We're going back tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years before we'll find that alignment. And then we've got the walls at Gosford with the 8 UFOs. The only glyph that keeps changing every time. No 2 of those glyphs are the same. It is not jewellery. There's nothing like that. I believe that's an account of something that took place a long, long time ago. Now with the UFOs, I'm prepared to say I'm 95 to 99% convinced that UFOs are part of this story. But it doesn't matter if they're not. The Egyptians were part of this story. The astronomy is part of this story, and they are the first people. But the sad part of this equation is this. With all these facts, and we're going to come back down more, and I've got another 5 sites I'm going to look at later. With all these facts, the central point, I believe, are the glyphs and the area around Carry On. And this is what really worries me. The land is for sale, and the authorities don't care. The land should not be for sale, and authorities should take notice of this place. This place changes history and it changes paradigms. The question we've got to ask is, why did the Egyptians spend, I think, over 4,000 years sailing to this place? What were they seeking? And I can tell you now, it's still here. What the wisdom of these elders has never gone away. They spent 4,000 years chasing this up. We've been here for 200 years and we haven't asked. We need to ask what it is they've got, and they'll share it with us. And we need to honour the places where they've shown this today. And as it stands, as I'm standing here right now, if you go back up to where the Gosford glyphs are, as you pull up there, you'll see a massive sign saying for sale, and underneath it there's a sign saying under negotiation. That cannot continue.